Con artists all use one technique, which is they try to make their targets, their marks, make a decision with not enough time and under a lot of pressure. And what con artists do to their enemies, to the people that they're planning to rob, many of us do to ourselves. We trick ourselves into making bad decisions by putting a ticking clock, by creating pressure that doesn't exist. Let's take a look at this problem over here. I want to show you how this works in an educational setting, and why it's so important to understand, and why if you can learn to avoid this technique of damaging yourself, if you can learn to stop conning yourself, if you can learn to stop putting fake pressure on yourself, you can massively increase your educational ability, your academic ability, your cognitive ability, your psychological strength, all those things. Let's take a look at this problem. Let's say we start with this problem 1 over a plus 3 over b. And I'm going to show you what we would do in the ideal situation and what happens if we're working with a non-ideal situation. Suppose a student comes to me and says, I have this problem 1 over a plus 3 over b. I don't know how to do it. No problem. Many people don't know how to do this type of a problem. That's no big deal. And so the first thing I'm going to do is start to check the underlying skills, right? There's only a couple skills at work here. There's multiplying binomials. There's understanding that fractions need to have common denominator, and that's basically it. There might be a couple other things that we might find out, but those are the big ones. So the first thing is I might give a student this problem, 1/7 plus 2/5. And either this would jog the student's memory and say, oh, I remember how to do this, they would do this, and I'd do basically the same thing with the algebra question. Or they wouldn't know how to do it, and then we would build up these required skills, right? And that whole process would take maybe half an hour. I mean, we're not talking about a big, complicated process. Now, if a student had major math deficits, like they didn't know how to do addition or multiplication, I don't know, maybe it would take 2 weeks. But this wouldn't take 20 years. And it would only take 2 weeks if somebody knew literally no math of any kind. Most of the time we can correct an issue like this, including building all the underlying skills in a half hour. It's not a big deal. Now imagine this. Imagine that a student has in their mind, right? Well, let's say you have this in your mind. You're saying, oh my God, I finished this problem tomorrow. I have to learn how to do this one problem by tomorrow. If I don't, I'm going to die. Okay, so now what are you doing? You're putting yourself under essentially fictional pressure, because there's nothing you ever have to do by tomorrow in school. You can just not go to school tomorrow. I mean, there's a million other things you can do. Or, worst case scenario, if you must go to school, you can just fail one quiz and then learn math and do well in the SAT, well in the AP calculus test, well in the SAT math too. No one's going to care about this one quiz tomorrow. But let's say you get in your head, oh my God, do well in this one quiz tomorrow, otherwise I'm going to. Okay. So now what's happening is you're trying to put yourself in a high stress, high anxiety situation. And what do we do in those situations? Make bad decisions. So in that situation, what happens? I say, okay, so we're going to do the same thing. Any skill tutor of any kind, not just a board math tutor, any tutor in the world is going to do basically the same thing. They're going to see, do you have the underlying skill? But right now, you're not in the headspace where you're ready to learn an underlying skill. Oh my God, I can't do this skill right now. I have to learn how to do this problem. I'm going to explode. Okay. So now, if you're at Bohr Method, we're going to try to calm you down and maybe talk to you a little bit about this. But let me show you what usually happens. Most tutors will cave to that. If you get enough panic, especially if you get yourself panicked and you also get your parents equally panicked, now a tutor has you freaking out and the parents freaking out, and they're just like, you have to tell me something right now, otherwise it's going to be. So when you have that going on, here's what you're going to get. Here's the result. Now, most math tutors can give you a formulaic way to do this problem. I mean, I'll show you one right now, right? So I might say the way to do this problem. Now, you can do this problem without knowing a single thing. I would say, okay, since it's an emergency, we're going to just on the bottom write the 2 letters next to each other. Then on the top, write this letter next to this letter, and this letter, this number next to this letter, and then put a plus sign and put this number next to this letter. And that's going to get you an answer. You'll get this. You'll get 3, and then you write the letter A and put a plus sign and a 1 and a B sign, and then on the bottom you write the 2 letters next to each other. But somebody who does this doesn't know anything about anything. I mean, you haven't learned one bit of math. All you've done is cram some utterly absurd formula. I mean, the formula I gave you is just, I mean, it's stupid. It's a nonsensical formula. You've short-term memorized some nonsense formula. Obviously, you're going to forget that formula because it's idiotic. You haven't learned any of the skills. So what are you going to do? You're going to do what so many students do. I mean, how many students do you think we see a year? I mean, we probably see 100 students a year that come in with the same story. They say, listen, I always do really well on my homework and quizzes, and I do terribly on my exams. And the reason is because you're most likely working with a tutor that is, when you freak out with the anxiety and try to create this panic, and if you get other people involved, and if you can get your parents panicked, or your grandparents panicked, or your next door neighbor panicked, and your dog panicked, then the tutor himself might just freak out and say like, "Oh my God, I got to do this right now," and teach you some idiocy. I mean, what I just taught you is the stupidest thing I could possibly come up with. It works kind of, but it's devoid of any kind of knowledge or understanding. So when you create this thing that says I have to finish this thing right now, you are basically conning yourself out of an education. You're preventing yourself from learning anything at all. So what should you do instead? Well, the first thing you need to remember is you always have this option. Just take the day off. There's nothing at school that's so urgent that you have to go. You can always just not go. That's the simplest thing. Um, the second thing you need to realize is this. You have to learn the underlying skills. Like what this problem is maybe 5 units of important, and this problem is 1,000 units of important. The more basic something is in math, the more it matters. This problem will be the foundation for this problem. If you can't understand this problem, you obviously can't understand this problem. You might short-term memorize some nonsensical formula, but you're never going to understand it. The key of this whole thing is this. When you're doing math, you're doing reading, anything, the task itself doesn't matter. As in, finishing a homework assignment doesn't matter. Finishing a bunch of assignment for your reading class math, none of that makes any difference. What matters is, are you learning how to do it? So what we do in form method tutoring is we just make sure that you're learning the actual underlying skill. And we're always going to do that. Now, if a student's very freaked out, it takes much longer, right? If a student is super panicked, then instead of just taking half an hour, it might take 3 or 4 hours. But we're still going to get it done one way or the other. You don't have to worry. We're going to make sure you actually learn the stuff. We're never going to cater to. We're never going to let you con yourself out of an education, basically. So when you're working with us, or when you're working with anybody, the key thing is stay calm, understanding that learning is important, understanding that completing the task itself, the homework assignment, just doesn't make any difference. If you learn the skills, you're going to dominate the SAT and all your standardized tests. No one's going to care about your school grades ever. I mean, the SAT carries more weight than all of your school tests and quizzes and exams from grades 3 through 12 combined. I mean, your skills will always matter much more than did you finish one silly homework assignment. So focus on that. And if you focus on that, not only are you going to dominate the standardized tests, you're going to dominate your exams, you can dominate your tests, and you will also dominate tomorrow's quiz.